From sold-out arenas to Sunday sermons, the transformations are mind-blowing. These heavy metal legends were at the top of the world before a higher calling changed everything. The thing nobody tells you is that one of them left a multi-platinum band at the peak of its fame to follow his new path. 1. Brian Welch. Many people are crazy about the band Korn. You see, in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were one of the biggest bands on the planet. They basically invented a new genre of music called nu metal and sold millions upon millions of albums. One of the key architects of that sound was their guitarist, Brian Welch, better known as Head. With his long dreadlocks and powerful guitar riffs, he was a true rock icon. The band lived a life that most people can only dream of, full of world tours, private jets, and adoring fans. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the scenes, Head was struggling. The constant touring and the pressures of fame were taking a huge toll on him. He was dealing with some serious personal demons and felt completely lost. What many overlooked was that he was also a father, and he was worried about the kind of example he was setting for his young daughter. He knew he needed a massive change, but he had no idea where to turn. He felt like he had everything the world could offer, but he was more empty than ever. Then, in 2005, he did something that sent shockwaves through the entire music industry. At the absolute peak of Korn's popularity, he quit the band. The reason was a complete stunner. He announced that he had become a born-again Christian and was leaving the rock and roll lifestyle behind to dedicate his life to his faith and his daughter. To put it mildly, fans were floored. He traded his guitar for a Bible and started speaking at churches, sharing his story of transformation. He even wrote a best-selling book about it called Save Me From Myself. For years, he was a powerful voice in the faith community, proving that even the biggest rock stars could find a new path. Eventually, he did return to music, but on his own terms, and even rejoined Korn years later, bringing his newfound perspective with him. From a nu metal pioneer to a thrash metal legend, our next story is just as surprising, involving one of the biggest bands in the history of the genre. 2. Dan Spitz. When you think of the big four of thrash metal, you think of Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and of course, Anthrax. For years, the lead guitarist shredding for Anthrax was a guy named Dan Spitz. He was there for the band's golden era in the 1980s, playing on classic albums that defined the sound of thrash metal. He was a guitar hero to an entire generation of metalheads, known for his lightning-fast solos and his energetic stage presence. He lived the life, touring the world and playing to massive crowds. But the thing nobody tells you is that Dan Spitz was on a spiritual search. While he was a part of one of the world's most famous metal bands, he was exploring his heritage and his faith. In 1993, he converted to Messianic Judaism, a belief system that combines Jewish traditions with the belief that Jesus is the Messiah. This was a profound change for him, and it started to shift his priorities in a big way. The wild lifestyle of a touring musician didn't quite fit with his new spiritual path. So, in 1995, he made a decision that baffled many of his fans. He walked away from Anthrax and the music industry altogether. But what he did next is the real wow factor. He didn't become a preacher or a speaker. Instead, he pursued his other passion with the same intensity he had for music. He became a master watchmaker. That's right, a thrash metal legend who used to play to tens of thousands of people a night, dedicated himself to the quiet, precise art of building luxury Swiss watches. He became one of the most respected watchmakers in the world. He eventually returned to music, but this time with Christian metal projects, proving his journey was truly one of a kind. A metal legend becoming a watchmaker is wild, but what about a front man who traded his microphone for a clerical collar? 3. Mark Broomhead. In the early days of Christian metal, a band called Seventh Angel was making waves in the United Kingdom. They were a thrash and doom metal band, which was a pretty unique combination. Their frontman was Mark Broomhead. With his powerful voice and intense lyrics, he led a band that wasn't afraid to mix heavy, aggressive music with messages of faith. They were pioneers, proving that metal could be about more than just dark and gloomy themes. But for Mark, the music was just one part of his calling. He felt a deeper pull towards serving his community in a more direct way. While many rock stars end up on a path of self-destruction, Mark was heading in the opposite direction. He felt that his purpose was bigger than just being on a stage. He wanted to help people who were struggling and guide them in their spiritual journeys. What happened next is truly remarkable. In the 2000s, Mark Broomhead, the frontman of a thrash metal band, left the touring life behind to become a vicar in the Church of England. It is a transition that is almost impossible to imagine. He went from headbanging on stage to leading a congregation and performing baptisms. The most amazing part of his story is that he founded a special faith community specifically for metal fans and people in the goth subculture. He created a space where people who felt like outsiders could explore their faith without judgment. Becoming a vicar is a huge step, but the next person on our list took it even further, starting his very own heavy metal church. 4. Brian Smith. Many musicians dream of making it big, playing in a band, and touring the country. Brian Smith was one of those guys. He was a talented musician in a secular metal band, living the rock and roll dream. He was on the road, playing shows, and doing what he loved. But deep down, he felt like something was missing. The party lifestyle that often comes with being in a band started to feel empty and unfulfilling. Everything changed when Brian found his faith. It was a powerful conversion that completely transformed his life and his priorities. He was so excited about his new path that he wanted to share it with everyone, including his bandmates. He started talking about his beliefs on stage and trying to connect with the audience on a spiritual level. The problem was, his band wasn't on board. They were a secular band, and they didn't want to become a Christian act. This created a huge conflict. Brian was faced with a massive choice. He could either give up talking about his faith to stay in the band, or he could walk away from his music career. He chose his faith. He left the band and started looking for a new way to combine his two biggest passions, heavy metal and his love for God. The result was something truly unique. In 2011, Brian Smith founded the first heavy metal Church of Christ in Dayton, Ohio. He became the senior pastor of a church where the music is loud, the people have long hair and tattoos, and the message is one of hope and redemption. From a local pastor to a global stage, our next star left his band to become a pastor who helps millions. 5. Mattie Montgomery. For fans of modern metalcore, the band For Today was a massive force. They were known for their heavy breakdowns, intense live shows, and lyrics that were openly and unapologetically Christian. The man delivering those powerful screams was their vocalist, Mattie Montgomery. He was a dynamic and charismatic frontman who wasn't afraid to share his beliefs with the thousands of fans who came to their shows. The band was incredibly successful in the metalcore scene, touring all over the world. But as the band's popularity grew, Mattie felt a different kind of calling. He loved being on stage, but he felt that his true purpose was to be a pastor and a leader in a church community. The tour life, with its constant travel and time away from home, was making it hard for him to pursue this deeper calling. He had to make a choice between the band he had built and the future he felt he was meant to have. In 2016, Mattie and the rest of For Today decided to call it quits. Mattie announced that he was stepping away from the music industry to become a full-time pastor. He became the senior pastor at a church and dedicated his life to serving his congregation. But what's truly a wow factor is what he did next. He and his church launched initiatives that have raised millions of dollars to pay off the medical debt of people in need all across the country. He went from being a metalcore frontman to a pastor who is making a huge, tangible difference in thousands of lives. These incredible stories show a deep commitment, But what happens when a legend finds faith but stays in the game? 6. Dave Mustaine. There is no name in thrash metal more famous or more controversial than Dave Mustaine. You see, he was the original lead guitarist for Metallica. After being kicked out of that band, he formed Megadeth out of pure anger and a desire for revenge. And to put it mildly, he succeeded. Megadeth became one of the big four thrash bands, selling over 50 million albums worldwide. For decades, Dave was known for his incredible guitar skills, his sneering vocals, and his fiery personality. He was the ultimate metal rebel. But behind the rage and the rock star persona, Dave was dealing with a lifetime of hurt and a serious battle with addiction. He hit rock bottom multiple times. Then, in 2002, a severe arm injury threatened to end his career forever. It was during this dark time that he had a profound spiritual awakening and became a born-again Christian. This change was so massive that it reshaped his entire life and career. The thing nobody tells you is how much his faith influenced his music from that point on. While he never quit Megadeth, his newfound beliefs had a huge impact. He famously refused to tour with bands that he considered to have dark or satanic themes. There were even reports of him leading prayer circles backstage before shows. His lyrics started to reflect his spiritual journey, and he became very open about his beliefs in interviews. For a man once known for his rage, it was a shocking transformation that proved even the angriest man in metal could find peace. From one of the biggest names in thrash to the man who basically invented shock rock, our next star's story is just as legendary. 7. Alice Cooper. Before there was Marilyn Manson, before there were bands in scary makeup, there was Alice Cooper. Back in the 1970s, he was the most shocking and controversial rock star in the world. His stage shows were like horror movies, full of fake blood, giant snakes, and mock executions. He created a character that was every parent's worst nightmare, and he became a global superstar because of it. He was the king of shock rock, a genre that blends heavy metal with theatrical horror. But the character of Alice Cooper was just that, a character. The man behind the makeup, Vincent Furnier, was the son of a preacher. As his fame exploded, he fell deep into the rock and roll lifestyle, especially a serious struggle with alcoholism. It got so bad that it nearly cost him everything. He knew he was on a path that was leading to a very dark end. In the mid-1980s, he hit his breaking point. He reconnected with his Christian roots and had a powerful born-again experience. What's so amazing is that he credits his faith with saving his life and helping him get sober for good. But here's the kicker. He never stopped being Alice Cooper. He still performs his horror-themed shows, but now he sees them in a new light. He says it's a way of showing the battle between good and evil. Off stage, he is a devout Christian who goes to church, teaches Bible study, and even helps other rock stars who are struggling with addiction. From a shock rocker to the drummer of one of the biggest metal bands ever, this next man's faith keeps the beat steady. 8. Nicko McBrain. Iron Maiden is more than a band. They're a global institution. For over 40 years, they have been one of the undisputed kings of heavy metal. Their drummer, the man powering that iconic galloping rhythm, is Nicko McBrain. He is known for his incredible drumming skills, his joyful personality, and his barefoot playing style. Since joining the band in 1982, he has been a constant presence, touring the world and playing to millions of screaming fans. What many overlooked is that for a long time, Nicko was also a heavy partier. The life of a rock star on the road can be a wild ride, and he was fully on board. But one day, something happened that changed his perspective forever. In 1999, he walked into a church with his wife, and he says he had an overwhelming experience that felt like coming home. It was a powerful moment that led him to become a committed Christian. This conversion had a huge impact on his life. He found a new sense of peace and purpose that helped him step away from the crazier parts of the rock and roll lifestyle. But he never left Iron Maiden. He is still their drummer, but he now uses his platform in different ways. He is an active deacon at his home church in Florida when he's not on tour. He often shares his testimony and talks about how his faith has given him stability and strength through all the years of touring. He's a perfect example of how a person can live out their faith even in the most unlikely of places. A legendary drummer finding God is one thing, but what about a frontman, once famous for his wild and offensive stage shows? 9. Blackie Lawless. In the 1980s, the Parents Music Resource Center, a group trying to censor rock music, had a list of bands they hated the most. Right near the top of that list was the band WASP and their frontman, Blackie Lawless. To put it mildly, their stage shows were wild and designed to shock people. They were one of the most controversial bands of the glam metal era, known for their aggressive music and outrageous lyrics. Blackie Lawless was the mastermind behind it all, a true shock rock villain. But you can see this everywhere in music history. The person on stage is not always the real person. As the years went on, Blackie started to feel that the character he had created was trapping him. He also began to explore his spiritual side, reconnecting with the Christian faith he had as a child. This led to a slow but profound transformation in both his life and his music. In the 1990s, he quietly became a born-again Christian. This change wasn't an overnight headline-grabbing event. It was a gradual shift. Fans started to notice it in the lyrics. His songs became less about shock value and more about deeper themes of faith, redemption, and spirituality. His 2015 album, Golgotha, was named after the place where Jesus was crucified and was filled with Christian themes. While he still performs as WASP, he has toned down the more extreme parts of his old shows, and he's not afraid to talk about his journey of faith in interviews. From a shock rocker's quiet change to a thrash icon's public struggle with faith, the next story is about the frontman of Slayer. 10. Tom Araya. For many heavy metal fans, the band Slayer is the definition of extreme. Their music is fast, aggressive, and their lyrics often deal with very dark and controversial subjects. For nearly 4 decades, the man screaming those lyrics was their frontman and bassist, Tom Araya. With his signature beard and powerful voice, he was the face of one of the most uncompromising bands in metal history. But here's the kicker, and it's something that confused a lot of fans for years. Tom Araya is a practicing Catholic. How could the frontman of a band with songs about Satan and war be a man of faith? It was a contradiction that he had to deal with for his entire career. He often said in interviews that he was a believer, but that he saw the band as entertainment. He believed that God understood that he was just playing a role. What many overlooked is the toll this took on him. As he got older, he found it harder and harder to sing about the dark subjects his band was famous for. He said that his faith was helping him cope with it all, but it was a clear struggle. When Slayer decided to retire in 2019 after a final world tour, Tom was ready. He said he wanted to spend more time with his family and focus on his life away from the stage. For him, faith provided a way to find peace after a long career spent exploring the darkest corners of the human experience. These older legends had incredible journeys. But what about the newer generation of metal stars who find faith? 11. Peter Steele. In the world of gothic and doom metal, there was no figure more imposing or iconic than Peter Steele. He was the frontman of the band Type O Negative, a towering figure standing at 6 feet 8 inches tall with a deep vampiric voice. The band's music was slow, heavy, and full of dark romance and black humor. They created a unique sound that earned them a massive and devoted fan base. Peter Steele, with his sharp wit and gloomy persona, was the heart and soul of the band. But his life off stage was a chaotic mess. He struggled for years with intense personal battles and addiction. He spent time in jail and in mental health facilities. To put it mildly, he was a man living on the edge, and his dark music often reflected his own inner turmoil. He was a true prophet of doom, but the doom he was predicting was often his own. Then, around 2006, something shifted. After a particularly difficult period in his life, Peter Steele re-embraced the Catholic faith he had grown up with. This conversion was a huge turning point for him. He started talking openly about his faith in interviews, and the band's final album, Dead Again, was filled with Christian references and themes. He even called himself a prophet of doom, but now it was for God. Sadly, his journey was cut short when he passed away in 2010. But in his final years, he found a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded him for most of his life. From a gothic giant to a thrash metal titan, our next story also involves a man finding a new calling while still in the game. 12. David Ellefson. If you're a fan of Megadeth, you know two names above all others: Dave Mustaine and David Ellefson. Ellefson was the band's original bassist and a co-founder. He was there from the very beginning, helping to create the signature sound that made them one of the biggest metal bands in the world. For decades, he was known as the steady, reliable anchor of the band, a master of the bass guitar. He lived the quintessential rock star life, touring the world and enjoying the fruits of massive success. But like so many others in the industry, the constant partying led him down a dangerous path. He developed a serious addiction that nearly destroyed him. In the early 1990s, he realized he needed help. He went through a 12-step program that not only helped him get sober, but also led him to reconnect with his Christian faith. It was a life-changing experience that set him on a completely new course. The thing nobody tells you is just how deep he went into his faith. He didn't just start going to church. He wanted to help others who were struggling. He started studying theology online while he was on tour with Megadeth. And in 2012, he took a huge step. David Ellefson, the bassist for Megadeth, became an ordained Lutheran pastor. It's an incredible contrast. One night he could be on stage playing to thousands of metal fans, and the next he could be leading a church service. He even started a new ministry called the MEGA Life, where he hosts Bible studies on tour. A thrash bassist becoming a pastor is a wow factor. But what about another member of Korn who also found a dramatic new path? 13 Fieldy. Korn wasn't just Brian Head Welch's band. The other half of their signature sound came from their bassist, Reginald Arvizu, better known as Fieldy. He is famous for his unique, slappy bass style that sounds more like a percussive instrument than a traditional bass. His sound is one of the most recognizable in all of modern metal. Alongside Head, he helped build Korn into a global powerhouse. And just like Head, he was living the high life, with all the parties and chaos that came with it. But the party came to a crashing halt. Fieldy's father, who he was very close to, became very ill. On his deathbed, his father, who had also become a Christian, had one final wish for his son. He asked Fieldy to find God. This was a powerful and emotional moment that hit Fieldy hard. He knew he had to honor his father's request. After his father passed away, Fieldy had his own born-again experience. The most shocking fact is that he says he quit his bad habits cold turkey, all in one day, through the power of his newfound faith. He never left Korn, but the change in his life was dramatic. He became very outspoken about his Christianity, even getting a large tattoo of a crucifix on the side of his face. His faith became a central part of his identity, and it heavily influenced his solo work, like his project Fear and the Dream Killer. He showed that you could still be a heavy metal rock star while living a life of faith. From nu metal to glam metal, the next story is about a guitarist from one of the 80s biggest party bands, 14 CC DeVille. In the 1980s, the kings of glam metal and the party scene were the band Poison. With their big hair, makeup, and catchy songs, they were all over MTV. Their guitarist, CC DeVille, was the epitome of the wild rock and roll lifestyle. He was known for his flashy guitar solos and his even flashier personality. He was a true party animal, and the band's reputation for excess was legendary. But as you can see everywhere in the history of rock, that kind of lifestyle often leads to a dark place. CC struggled for years with very serious addiction issues. It got so bad that it led to him being fired from Poison at the height of their fame. He spent years in a downward spiral, a cautionary tale of rock and roll excess. Then, in the 2000s, after years of struggle, he finally got sober. A huge part of his recovery was his decision to become a born-again Christian. His faith gave him the strength and the framework to rebuild his life. To put it mildly, it was a tough road. He faced backlash from some fans and people in the industry who didn't understand his change, but he stuck with it. He eventually rejoined Poison, but as a new man. He continues to tour with the band, but he is now very open about his sobriety and his faith, often sharing his testimony about how he was saved from a life of destruction. Poison was huge, but our next star fronted another massive band from that era and has been very public about his journey. 15. Josie Scott. If you listened to rock radio in the early 2000s, you definitely heard the band Saliva. Their blend of hard rock and nu metal produced huge hits like Click Click Boom and Always. The voice behind those hits was their frontman, Josie Scott. He had a powerful, raspy voice and a commanding stage presence that made him a star. The band was a massive success, selling millions of records and touring with some of the biggest names in rock. What many fans didn't know at the time was that Josie was a Christian. He wasn't always as vocal about it in the early days, but his faith was a guiding force in his life, even as his band was climbing the charts. As the years went on, he became more and more open about his beliefs. Unlike some others who left their bands, Josie stayed with Saliva for many years while still living out his faith. The thing nobody tells you is that he even started to collaborate with artists in the Christian music world, bridging the gap between secular rock and gospel. He eventually did leave Saliva to focus on his family and other projects, but he has continued to tour and make music, always sharing his story of faith with his audience. He has shown that it's possible to be a mainstream rock star without compromising your beliefs. These stories are amazing, but sometimes faith leads a musician to simply walk away to focus on what truly matters. 16. Peter Baltes. For fans of classic German heavy metal, the band Accept is legendary. They are one of the pioneers of the genre, known for their powerful riffs and the iconic voice of their original singer, Udo Dirk Schneider. But the musical foundation of that band for over 40 years was their bassist, Peter Baltes. He was there from the beginning in the 1970s, co-writing many of their biggest songs and helping to shape their powerful sound. He was a true heavy metal veteran. Peter was also a devout Christian, and his faith was always a very important part of his life. For many years, he was able to balance his life as a touring musician with his personal beliefs and his family life. He was a steady presence in a genre known for its chaos. He wasn't flashy or controversial. He was just a brilliant musician who loved to play. But as the years went on, the demands of being in a world-famous band started to weigh on him. In 2018, fans were stunned when it was announced that Peter Baltes was leaving Accept after more than 4 decades. There was no big fight or drama. His reason was simple and heartfelt. He said he needed a change in his life and wanted to step away from the music business to spend more time with his family and focus on his faith. It was a quiet and graceful exit from a true legend of the genre, a man who decided that after a long and successful career, his priorities were at home. From a quiet exit to a quiet influence, our next star's faith has always been a subtle part of his epic music. Sibzane. Hansi Kurisch. Power metal is a style of heavy metal known for its fantasy themes, epic song structures, and soaring vocals. And in the world of power metal, there is no band more beloved than Germany's Blind Guardian. Their frontman, Hansi Kurisch, is a master storyteller. His lyrics are like fantasy novels, full of tales of dragons, elves, and epic battles, often inspired by the works of authors like J.R.R. Tolkien. But not all things are what they seem. While the band's music is full of fantasy, Hansi's personal life is grounded in a very real faith. He has been a lifelong Christian, and his beliefs have been a constant and steadying force throughout his long career. He is a great example of a musician who doesn't need to shout about his faith from the stage to live it out. The thing nobody tells you is that if you listen closely to Blind Guardian's lyrics, you can often find subtle nods to his beliefs. The themes of hope, redemption, and the battle between light and dark that are so common in their music are also central themes of Christianity. He has never left the industry or changed his band's style. Instead, he has quietly integrated his worldview into his art, creating music that is both epic and meaningful. He proves that a person's faith can be a deep well of inspiration without having to be the main subject of every song.